Welcome to the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast, where educators come together to discuss their journey on the road to financial independence. Now, please join our co-hosts, Dave and Brandon, as they prepare to help other educators get fit with their finances.
Thanks, Dave.
Welcome and thanks for joining us on episode number 165 of the Financially Independent Teachers Podcast. If you think your story could help other educators and you'd be willing to come on the show, please check out our webpage at financiallyindependentteachers.com and fill out the form to come on the show. Man, we are in for such a treat today. My favorite podcast, 1,000 times better than the podcast we're on right now that I host, is the Money Guys Show. And we are so fortunate to have Brian Preston on the show today. Brian, how are things going in Tennessee?
Oh, Dave, thanks for having me on. But I got to tell you, this is what we call Chamber of Commerce season here in Tennessee, is because if you have anybody you want to move to Tennessee, you bring them right now, because we're in that season where it gets to be mid 70s, low humidity, and everything is super green. So we're blessed and happy right now. That's for sure.
Life, my family's life, my children's lives, that whole family tree has been changed because of the content that you've produced. So I just want to say thank you for that. And it is the best show out there. So let's get right into this thing. I'm not even going to give you a chance to respond there.
Thank you for that intro. And I'll tell you, what you just described is what I wrote Millionaire Mission for, is that I still, because, I'm not too different from you, is that I was young, aspiring, and I knew I wanted to be good with money, but I didn't know necessarily how to do it. So I remember when I first bought The Wealthy Barber and then The Millionaire Next Door, and how those things just lit my brain on fire for trying to become better and, with my money and take control of my financial life. So I've tried to recreate through my own experience, as well as all my clients that I work with, because I really do feel like there's a better way to do money, and we have done a great job. And this also is on the same tree. It has the same roots of education, is that I recognize very quickly most people were doing money all wrong. And it reminded me of, and saw a lot of similarities with, if you ever see on social media, and you probably see it with students, is that if you don't know how to do the order of operations with math, you think about PEMDAS, and please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, you'll never get the correct answer on the math question that's in front of you. Well, it's the exact same way with your finances. If nobody's telling you what to do with your next dollar, you kind of are rudderless and just floating around and not making the right decisions. So we've tried to remedy that, and I've tried to tell everybody exactly what to do with their next dollar, and that's what the financial order of operations is there to be a resource for.
Since you mentioned that, we have a predominantly teacher-centric audience, and what we've realized, Brian, over 165 episodes is it comes back to Dave Ramsey's study on millionaires, that teacher is actually the third most represented career in Dave Ramsey's study. Now, a lot of teachers actually don't believe that when they hear that. And who knows how Dave got all of his data. It could be a teacher who's married to a high income earning spouse, or maybe it was a professor or whatever. But on this journey, I think it's proven in 165 episodes, we've had over 25 teacher millionaires that have come on our show. And again, net worth, simply assets minus liabilities for those who are listening maybe for the first time. But some of the ways they got there is simply following what you guys have is the financial order of operations. It is possible for a teacher to get there. It's possible for anybody to get there. Can you give us a little more detail on the 9 steps that you guys have?
Yeah, well, I think what you're hitting on, and the reason teachers are so effective, is that I always talk about the 3 ingredients to wealth creation, and there's discipline, meaning that you actually have the understanding of deferred gratification, living on less than you make, making the good habits is extremely easy, and the bad habits extremely hard. And then that leads to, if you can be good at discipline, which teachers are, I mean, that's just built into being a good educator. You have to be disciplined to be in school and study and all the other stuff. That leads to money, because that margin does create the money, and you actually put that money to work. And you do that long enough through the 3rd ingredient, which is time, which is actually the most valuable and the most scarce. And that's what creates tremendous success. And I actually work with quite a number of educators, and I think that a lot of people, yes, you don't have to make a ton of money if you put it to work soon and often. And teachers are good at that. I mean, you tell them a plan and put together that lesson plan of how you do your finances, and it just kind of magically happens. And that's exactly, because you mentioned, are people brand new to the content? I would encourage you, if you're brand new, go get the free stuff first. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we actually lay out the 9 steps of the financial order of operations, so you don't have to try to, feverishly take notes. You can actually do it. But we jump in with the basics. Can you cover your highest deductible first? That way you don't make desperate decisions at the world's worst times. And then we have, employer match. You and I, even before we hit the record button, we're talking about, getting free money when you get dollar for dollar matching up to 5%. You had a former student talk to you about. I mean, that's anybody offering you 50 to 100% guaranteed rate of return. You got to get in there and take advantage of that. And then, high interest debt. I think that's where most Americans stumble, is that they fake it until they make it, or they think that they can just go, take a credit card and they'll catch up later. That's not going to be the way it works, because when you have a credit card company that's charging you 20% plus, you'll never get ahead. And then, you can carry on to emergency reserves, which is, 3 to 6 months. It's letting cash have a little more breathing room. So it's not a one-time emergency like step 1. It's now, if you got laid off or had an extended time you couldn't work. And then, of course, I get excited about step 5, which is the Roth and the HSA, because very few things let you have tax-free growth. And that's what step 5 is. Step 6 is maxing out those retirement options. Step 7 is, we call it hyperaccumulation, but it's really, do you know where you're going and how you're actually going to use the resources when you do hit retirement? So this is what we focus on in step 7 of hyperaccumulation. It's actually how you'll use the money, the 3-bucket strategy between taxable accounts, tax deferred, and tax-free accounts. Step 8 is exciting because that's abundance goals. We call it prepaid future expenses, but it's really when you get to now take care of the kids, increase your lifestyle. Maybe you start doing, residential real estate. There's all kind of opportunities in step 8. And then step 9, which is after you've gotten wealthy, you can do stay wealthy behaviors of like prepaying low interest debt. But it has a time and a place, so that you can do it not at the detriment of your future self, and investing your army of dollars.
And then step 10 is the universal life policy that you're going to borrow against in the future, right?
Well, I mean, you probably will need some life insurance as you're on this journey, but it'll probably be like my life insurance, which is going to be a whole lot of term life insurance.
Yeah, it's so funny. If you've never caught the Money Guys show, please don't leave us at Financially Independent Teachers. We hope you stick with us. But when you listen to their show, you will be hooked. And every now and again, Brian and Bo will have a funny episode on bad financial advice from social media. And they'll play little clips of what people are saying on social media that, hey, you've got to go ahead and start, you know, hey, you're a first year teacher, you're making, $43,000 a year, but you need to go out and you need to go buy, 3 sets of duplexes right now. And you need to go ahead and borrow against the duplexes. You need this universal life policy. There's so many roadblocks in the way. I love the fact that it seems like much of what you do, speaking of teachers, is inspired in a way from a teacher that you had back in high school. Can you tell us a little bit about the teacher you had and how maybe that teacher made you believe that this stuff was possible?
I thought about that moment. I call it the Morrow moment. And Mr. Morrow, his name was John Morrow. Mr. Morrow wasn't even at our school for that long, because I had to ask my buddies, because I didn't buy the yearbook for every year. I only bought my freshman year and my senior year. So I had to ask my buddies to go look and see if they could get me a picture of Mr. Morrow from upcoming when we do the book tour. And we were able to find one picture of Mr. Morrow, but he was a Vietnam vet. He was helping with our wrestling team, and he was teaching an economics class, and it wasn't even part of the curriculum. This is one of those sidebar comments, and I don't know What compelled Mr. Morrow to share what he did? But he came in and started class one day and says, I'm really jealous of you guys because everybody in this room right now could be a millionaire. Me coming from, pretty economically challenged at the time because my dad was even laid off in middle school. So we had a lot of struggles at the house financially. And I remember thinking, whoa, wait a minute. I need to pay attention to this. And he said a simple statement. He said, if every one of you guys was just saving and investing $100 a month, you'd be a millionaire by the time you retire. And I was like, wait a minute. Because I was working the Hardee's drive through and I was like, I could save $100 a month. And it really was that simple. But it changed my life. I mean, it really, because he had made something that seemed so elusive and impossible. Now it just seemed like it was a matter of just inevitable if I would just do what he mentioned. And what he was really hitting on was compounding growth and compounding interest and letting your money do the heavy lifting. The problem that saddens me is that most people will hear something like that and they'll do it for a month or two, maybe even a year or two, but then they get distracted or they don't make the behavior automatic, and they drop off. And this is something that you got to do it for really 10, 15, 20 years. It's slow, patient work, but then if you'll put it in the time, it's amazing. I mean, talk about, I'm now in my 50s and I know when my neighbors, we always talk about when the market's having these run up periods, we're like, can you believe what's going on with our 401ks and our retirement accounts? And it's all, you can't tell which dollar made you wealthy because it was all just a stacking up of small little decisions. But I promise you, if you'll do this, it will change your life in a big way. If you just set it, forget it, and make an automatic behavior for your financial self, you won't miss the money and you'll wake up and you'll have everything fulfilled. One of my favorite things being a financial advisor is that I have some clients that naturally are not good with money, but every time we've met, I'm like, hey, tell me how much cash you have. And then I saw you got a pay raise on your tax when I reviewed your tax return. I saw you got, so why don't we take a few $100s more a month and put it into your investments? And then I always smile 15 years in the future when now those clients are like, man, I don't remember what we did, but now there's millions of dollars here. And I'm like, yeah, it's because I was slowly Jedi mind tricking you into saving a little bit more so you could have this awesome life. And they didn't even notice it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the critical challenges that we have for our audience is, let's say that you're a first year teacher and you started investing $100 a month into your Roth IRA. Things are tight. Maybe you've got student loans, you've moved out on your own for the first time, not a whole lot of margin there. But
Yeah.
even as you head into year two, the cool thing about the teaching community, I mean, obviously we wish we made, a lot of money, but we make, I think in most cases enough money, especially if you have a dual income household, but you have those pre-release salary schedules that are online. You can
Yeah.
map out your entire 30-year career before you ever get started. And you can see in year one, I'm going to make 43,000. In year two, I'm going to bump up to 44,500. In year
Yeah.
three, I'm up to 45,000. And the challenge for teachers, I would say, is every year, even if it's only $10 a month or $20 a month, increase a little bit more than you were investing in the previous year. And if you do that over the course of a 30-year career, you'll have two teachers like we had on the show in North Carolina where things have been pretty tough here with they've removed master's pay in our state. Your pay has been frozen your last 10 years. But we had
Yeah.
a North Carolina teaching couple on, and they actually became net worth millionaires at 48 years old just
Wow.
on their North Carolina teacher salaries because they started with Roth IRAs back in the mid 90s, right when they got into education. It was only $100 a month then, but slowly, of course, over the course of time, once their kids were grown and graduated, it increased to over $1,000 a month, and they were net worth millionaires, 48 years old, even on teacher salaries.
Yeah. Well, you've probably, I'm sure you've seen it, Dave. Some of our most recent content, it's gotten good engagement, is we're doing case studies on Maddie the mutant. And
Yep.
Manny the mutant, it's Maddie, his spouse, and then Manny the mutant's the mutant couple. We never give them big we don't give them starting salaries that are really high. We give them very reasonable salaries, whether it's $40,000, $50,000, and we don't give huge pay raises. So it probably in a lot of ways does look like the path of an educator is that, yes, it's not big money, but it's consistent money, and it's structured in a way with the right tools that you can create tremendous wealth if you just, do the hard work of putting a plan into action.
Yeah, one thing I did this year, it was kind of a risk, Brian, day one of school, but I've got pretty good kids. The first day of school, when every kid walked in the door, they actually got the wealth multiplier, the lump sum multiplier. It wasn't right when they got in the door. I had a challenge, and I had a big plastic container in the front of class. And what I had done is I had gone to the bank and I had taken out I forget what the number is off the top of my head at age 0. I
Yeah.
think it's a lump sum of, what is it, like $347 or something like that.
I have now this on my deliverable. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we have the wealth multiplier for really any age, but $1 for a newborn is worth $647. So I mean you could back into how much you need to do a million, and it's just not a ton of
Yeah, and
money.
you guys had a lump sum one somewhere out
Yeah.
there that shows you the
It's up
lump
there on
sum.
the
Yeah,
resource
you have the
page.
monthly. I did the whatever the lump sum was. It was a little over $2,000.
I think
I put that.
it was $1,544, I
There you go.
believe.
Okay, so yeah, if it's 1,544, that sounds right. I went to the bank, I took out that money, and I played a game. I said, okay, I'm going to pass this around the class. Everybody can kind of touch the container, and you've got to guess how much money do you think is in here. And then that parlayed into whoever was closest. Of course, classic teacher award gave them a Tootsie Pop and a lollipop or whatever. And
Got
then
the
I
one
shared with
thousand
them,
five hundred forty dollars.
what do you think this $1,500 means? And then we went through, and everybody was trying to guess, and nobody could figure it out. And I said, this is exactly, I said, how many of you would like to have kids one day in the future? And I said, if you take this amount when your child is born, put it in the S&P 500, set it and forget it, let compound interest do its thing, your kid mathematically, based on historical returns, which of course are no guarantee of future results, there's a good chance that your kid is going to be a millionaire just from that lump sum. And then all the eyeballs and the light bulbs turn on. And it makes these middle income kids and lower middle income kids believe that, wow, I don't have to be a rapper. I don't have to play in the NBA. I don't have to be a Division I football player at Florida like Brian's dad, and
Yeah.
hope that I can, you know, make it to the NFL to be a millionaire. I can actually start this process young, and that content is just so life changing.
Well, Dave, you just said something that because my whole journey, I was on the school board for an extended period of time, and that all happened because I met the superintendent for my old hometown. Because I was trying to go into this classrooms and teach personal finance, and actually, because the curriculum for high school kids was so full, they only let me into the consumer math classes because they said all the advanced kids, in the AP classes and the advanced maths, they didn't have time in the curriculum. So they put me in the consumer math classes. And every one of those kids, when I went in there and tried to talk to them, they all thought they were either going to be rap stars, baseball stars, or some professional. And I was trying to tell them, I was like, the real opportunity, and I even showed up with some articles from the Wall Street Journal, was go be good with money. Become the accountant for all these people you're saying you want to become, the music star, the athlete, because that's where your propensity. Because I used to tell, because I worked with professional athletes at one of the firms I worked at before I started my first company, and this stat always stuck with me. If you take the typical stadium, like think about a baseball stadium, you know, where it can hold, or think about a football stadium where it can hold like 50,000 people. They will go and put the name of every person who's in that stadium into that bucket, because for that many people, it's not going to be a cup; it's going to be a bucket, and then pull out one name. That's going to be the name of the professional athlete that can make it out of that 50,000 people in the stadium. But if you go become an accountant or a finance major or a teaching major, your odds are going to be significantly higher. And that's something I've always tried to tell everybody. You don't have to be pitch perfect with your financial journey. Just make small, steps forward. And I think in that you'll see how easy this is once you get the ball rolling. It really is.
And I don't know how familiar you are. Obviously, I know you've done a lot of content on the FIRE community, and kind
Yeah.
of the godfather of FIRE is J.L. Collins, who wrote the book
Yeah.
The Simple Path to Wealth. And we actually just released our first book, Brian, last fall, and J.L. Collins wrote the foreword to that book.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
he talks about in the book that, again, you don't have to do all this heavy lifting. It's just that you've got to put one foot in front of the next and get a little bit stronger today than you were yesterday. Of course, Bo says it all the time. The best time to start investing was yesterday. The next best time to invest is here right now. So whether you can do $25 a month, $50 a month, I think the hardest part for a lot of teachers, Brian, is that just like many college kids, you're so content driven in your college experience. There's no personal finance education.
Right.
Literally just opening up a Roth IRA in Vanguard, Fidelity, Charles Schwab. That sounds really intimidating. So we've kind of gone against the grain, and we wrote in our book, it goes directly against what Dave Ramsey would say. We say start investing in your Roth IRA, no matter how much debt you have, immediately. As soon as you get a job, open up a Roth IRA, even if you just set it to $5 a month. You might not be able to do more than $5 a month for 5 years until you can, get your emergency fund built up and things like that. But the hard part of it, actually having the account and having it open, and now just having to transition how much you're putting in each month, that work is already done. Where a lot of people view it as this big Goliath that they don't even know how to open up the account.
No, make it inevitable. That's what it's the consistency of the behavior that is the secret sauce that people miss, is that they do it once. I think about when I bought The Wealthy Barber back in the mid 90s. I was so impressed with it. I bought 5 copies of it and gave it to all my buddies, and they all funded their Roth IRAs that year. This is like 1998. But I look back, I don't know if they did it in year 2. And that's the thing is, yeah, doing it one time is something to be celebrated, but setting it up as an automatic behavior, an automated process, that's what makes wealth inevitable. And I think a lot of people fall off from that discipline. And that's one of the things we always try to encourage people to do. Don't drop out just because the market's scary or you get distracted by the messy middle of life. Try to keep consistent, and that's exactly what you just described, Dave.
And we love the highlight reel life, right? Like Sports Center top 10.
Yeah.
My favorite basketball player of all time was Tim Duncan from Wake Forest here in North Carolina. Great career with San Antonio. Rarely was there ever a Tim Duncan highlight on ESPN. He shot little jump shots off the glass, do little spin moves.
Right.
He rarely even dunked. But they do show, the guy that jumped from the foul line and dunked. We all want to have that moment where we're jumping like Michael Jordan from the free throw line and doing the 360 and the alley oop to ourselves off the backboard. Where at the end of the day, if you can just make 85% of your free throws, you're going to have a spot on the team. If you can just be consistent and you can be in the game, you don't have to be a high flyer and be able to dunk to
Yep.
win. And we've even seen some of that in the NCAA tournament this year. So I want to talk about the Millionaire Mission, but if you don't mind, I would love to do like a Money Guy-esque Q&A session,
Yeah.
just for like
Yeah.
maybe
I love it. Yeah.
7 to 8 minutes. And then I definitely want to hit the book. But we had a lot of our listeners who love your show. They love your content. They said, please, can you ask Brian some questions? So the first question that I've got here is they said, could we get curriculum to go with the release? This is a teacher of the Millionaire Mission. He said, I would love to use it. And I think the creative team at the Money Guy Show could definitely make some great content for high schoolers. And he said he already has 30 of your books on purchase for a pre-order for his students to use for next year. But is there any way that you guys might be interested in getting into that content? And let me tell you this, Brian, I don't know how much you've paid attention, but I believe now 26 states in the United States, North Carolina being one of them, are now mandating personal finance as a
Right.
requirement for kids to graduate high school. And I get to teach that class. It's one of the 4 required history classes. So there is a market there for these high school kids. What do you think about content from the creative team for these high school
I
kids?
will tell you, we're always, and I have a great team. I mean, you get to see, on speaking of Q&A shows, you get to see my creative director Reby on. She's the one that feeds us the questions, and she we call her the head cat herder. But we have had discussion, is that, look, we already see the steps forward with Millionaire Mission, the financial order of operations. The groundwork is laid. We know we want to do even more content for younger investors. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity there. We just got to get through the book launch and the next phase, and that is something we're definitely looking towards. But because I've had so many teachers reach out, and I've even told Reby one of my goals long term is I'd love to have a program to where we could encourage that. Because I mean, I think about my own journey with Mr. Morrow and just and even like I grew up in a household where my parents were great with money, meaning they were disciplined, living on less than they made, but they never knew how to invest. My parents, their idea of investing was a CD, so they never really created wealth. They just were good with money. They were disciplined with money, and that's the hard part. I always like to say that's the 90 to 95% of the difficulty is being disciplined enough to actually have money and margin. They just never put it to work. So I'd love to be able to wake up that beast within people to let them actually let their money work harder than they can with their back, their brains, their hands. And I think really, I truly believe anyone can be wealthy if you just put it to purpose and also just start the action of making it, pushing the pebble down the hill. It will become inevitable in a lot of ways. I know I keep using that word. That's how passionate I am about it. So I will tell you that we don't have it yet, but give me a little time to digest getting this book out, and then I think that's probably in the future.
Yeah, that's exciting. We talk a lot with our students, and we talk in our book about the fit 25 by 25 rule. But if you plug in the compound interest calculator, if you can have $25,000 invested by 25 years old,
Oh yeah.
mathematically at 65, you're a millionaire. So I'll break that down with 14-year-old freshmen the first week of class and say, guys, you have 11 years. You have an 11-year sprint. What can you do to get $25,000 invested? And maybe realistically, your freshman year, maybe you can only get 1,000 invested. Maybe your
Right.
sophomore year, maybe you're now getting your license. Maybe you can bump up to 1,500. But you've got birthdays, you've got Christmas, you've got other holidays, you might get money. And then, of course, if you go into the workforce, you can do a lot of heavy lifting from 21 to 25. I mean, you can easily get to 25,000 by 25. That's $1 million at 65 years old. And the more kids that can know about that, and again, as we've talked about, laying out a path, giving them the roadmap, giving them the GPS to life, and all they have to do is plug in. The hard work's already done for them. They just have to look at the map, go to MapQuest, uh, and follow the path. We're going to have millionaires all over this country, and that's the goal.
There's never been a better time to try to start this either. I mean, back when I first started investing, there was all these commissioned investments. Index funds were not really a big thing at that time. Now life is kind of easy. I mean, you can do it
Oh
all
yeah.
so easily on your phone. You can buy index funds which replicate the returns of just the broad market and this ever exciting law of accelerating returns and innovation that's kind of powering the world that we live in. It's a great time to start this journey. It really is.
Never been a better time. I'll have my kids do that too. Day one, they'll pull out. I'll say, okay, who has their phone? They'll pull it out. I'll say, who has Cash App? Of course, they all have Cash App, and I let them know this might not be the best idea, but on Cash App, you can actually invest in VOO, and you can buy the S&P 500. Now,
Right.
I give them the warning of, I really don't like the fact that you have such easy access to cashing in and cashing out of this, but you're 14 years old as a freshman, you can start investing right now.
Yeah.
And if you have a job, you can do an IRA. So I love the fact that you guys might get into that for high school kids. We had a question here that said, how many of your Abound Wealth clients, and that's Brian's company, Abound Wealth, if you're looking to take the relationship to the next level, if you'd like to have somebody professionally manage your stuff, how many of your Abound Wealth clients are teachers? And would you be willing to share maybe one or two teacher success stories of people that are winning with money that are in education?
Oh man, I got to tell you, the business now has gotten to the size that I don't have the exact number of teachers. But I can tell you from my own journey. Um, I mean, I have approximately 80 clients that I still work with personally, and I know at least probably 6 or 7 of them are educators. So I mean, that's got to be that's like an 8% if you just are basing off that. And here's what Let me tell you some success stories. I had a husband and wife that came to me in 2003, scared to death because, yeah, I think a lot of us have short memories, or I'm just old. The 2000, 2001, 2002 stock market was a bad period of time. That was the dot-com bursting of the bubble, and a lot of people lost money during that period. Now, here's the part that the history books don't really tell you. If you diversified, during that period, or you just kept buying during all that, you were going to be okay. You didn't even lose. It wasn't like 2008 with the Great Recession. That was actually if you did the right things in the .com, you were okay. And that part I don't think makes it out there. But I had this brand new prospect couple, and I needed a prospect back then because I started my first company in 2002. They came to me, and they both were educators, and they had at the time, now later in life, because they're still clients, by the way, later in life there was inheritance and other, but that wasn't, it was just normal. It wasn't like it was a big windfall, but they had done nothing other than 403bs, and now they were coming to figure out, because they thought they were going to retire in 2 years. um, and they were right under, at that time, I bet they were four or $500,000. But they started. We did the whole retirement plan, and I did unfortunately have to tell the husband that he was going to have to work 3 more years, which I know that's not probably super exciting, but I'm telling you that. But fast forward, now they have a multi-million-dollar portfolio, and I would still say 80% of that is that $400,000 has grown into. I mean, since 2003, it's multiplied many times over, and it's all from their hard work, determination of just set it, forget it, make the good habits extremely easy, the bad habits hard. And they've done it. I've got it. And by the way, he referred me. That's why I think I have so many teachers, is because anybody with 403bs back then, I could jump in and help on with, like in Georgia specifically, like Gwinnett County, Clayton County. They didn't have Social Security. They had big 403bs to help. And I was able to jump in on quite a few of those teachers, um, and help them out. And they all turned out to be extremely successful. And it's all based upon small decisions that turned into big results.
Time is our greatest asset. Time is our
It
greatest
really,
asset.
if you can just start investing. I know, and here's a little, you didn't ask for this, but this is from my school board days. When I got into the school system that I was on the school board for, they had 403bs, and they only had them in these annuities. And I was so disappointed in that. But a lot of people didn't realize, and I know this industry's gotten a lot better because of fiduciary obligations and other things have changed this since the early 2000s. But 403bs are unique, is that you don't have to have just one provider like a 401k. 403bs, you can go advocate in your school system and get low cost providers added to the platform. You could go get Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab. Any of those would love to be on your 403b platform. Just go be an advocate to make sure, if you feel like all of your options on your 403b are only insurance heavy, annuity type products, get in there and advocate and make a change.
Yeah, there's actually a big community out there. There's a guy named Dan Otter, and his community is called 403B Wise. And they actually have kind of a green light, yellow light, red light system where they'll rate all of the different providers for 403Bs all over the country. And there are teachers who are teachers, parents, husbands, wives. They're going to their school boards, they're talking to their finance and HR people, and they're getting Fidelity, they're getting Vanguard. But it is taking some work, but it is doable. Speaking of that, one of the things that I think teachers have that's a superpower is that we do have a pension. We're one of the few careers left that has a pension. I know here in North Carolina, 6% out of every one of my checks goes to the pension. And Brian, I'll be able to retire fully at 51 years old. I'll have a pension of $40,000 a year, and I'll have free health care till 65
That's
covered in
incredible.
North Carolina. Can you talk about the power of the pension? And, you know, when it comes to your goal at the Money Guys, you guys say a great goal is not the Dave Ramsey invest 15% of your gross income. If you want to be a financial mutant, 25% is a great goal to strive for, which again, maybe somebody can't start it out at that, but maybe they grow to that over time. how would you view the pension and contributions? Let's say I'm a teacher in North
Yeah.
Carolina. I make $50,000 a year. I'm contributing 6% to my pension every paycheck. And I literally only have $250 a month that I can spare to my Roth IRA. Would you let that person count that 6%
Yeah.
contribution?
For sure. I mean, especially because we talk about, look, while your household income is less than $200,000, yeah, I think you can count not only your contribution but also your employer's contribution in that 25% number. So that takes the edge off completely, because you just said for yourself that you're doing 6%. If I had to guess, and this is back to, once again, whether it's my school board or county commission, if you're doing 6, I bet your local government is doing, or the state is probably doing 8 to 10%. So I mean, just that right there is 16 to probably right around 16%, or somewhere between 12 to 16% is probably being funded by you and the government directly into your pension. So that 25% just got a heck of a lot easier, meaning 2/3 of it was already just set up by your pension funding. So do that. And then when you stack in the Roth IRA on top of it, you're probably hitting that number without even realizing it. The other thing I always try to tell people who have pensions, because they are so unique, is that when you're trying to do retirement planning to figure out how much do you need to build your assets up to, because that's really what that 25% is trying to do, is try to make sure, how do you create the behavior and the discipline that will create that level of wealth that you'll need to live off those dollars in the future. Well, you'll need to know as you get closer to retirement is what are your actual living expenses are, because that's really what you're trying to replace. Now you can subtract out what your pension benefit will be, and what the difference is. That's going to now tell you what you require from your investment assets, and now you can back into how much of that's going to come from the other savings and investments that you've been doing for hopefully the last 2 to 3 decades. And you'll see that number is pretty digestible. So you just have to have a plan of action, begin with the end in mind. And then I'd also encourage people, if you want to, optimize your journey as you're building up those army of dollars, use the financial order of operations so you know what to do with your next dollar, so you can take the guesswork out of the entire process.
I think every dollar needs to be given an assignment. And,
Mm.
if we don't give those dollars assignment, we're going to wonder where that money went. So I think the good news is, if you're a teacher, say you're 50 years old and you're just learning about money now, you have no money invested, you have a pension that's going to pay you $40,000 a year. Let's say that you're in a state that also pays you Social Security.
Yeah.
Let's say maybe at 62 years old, you might be making $60,000 a year the rest of your life. Uh, from 62 on, that's the equivalent of having over $1 million maybe in an investment portfolio, if you're following something like the generic 4% rule.
Well, and look, one of those teachers that was referred to me by that couple I was mentioning, he got into the administration of education. And y'all know that same pension system that is going to get you 60% of your final years of income. If you get into the leadership side of the administration, those pensions can get very lucrative very quickly. And that's another thing that's out there if you were trying to weigh whether or not you want to stay in the classroom versus go into administration. Maybe in those last few years, it's okay to go to central office and get the bigger paychecks.
Absolutely. A lot of those pensions are based on your last 4 years. Two
Yeah.
more questions, if you don't mind, then I want to talk about the millionaire mission. Um, One thing that we have access to, which I think is a financial superpower, is the 457B.
Oh, yeah.
Again, in North Carolina, you can retire with a full pension at 30 years. So a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people start out at 22 years old. Maybe you teach till 52 and you might not have access to the growth of that Roth IRA till 59 and a half, or the growth of your 401k or 403b. Can you talk a little bit about the 457 and the power maybe as a bridge account to get you there? And really the 457 versus, say, a taxable brokerage account. How would you prioritize those two things? Let's pretend that the 457 has good low cost index funds for options.
Yeah. But by the way, I'll go ahead and just, because you're like, why do these guys keep talking about 401ks, 403bs, 457s? What's this numeric, soup that they're throwing out. This is all tax code numbers. That's why, we all get, any of us financial nerds, we love talking about the 401ks, the 403bs, 457s, but they're really just the tax code, that the legislation that kind of made this stuff all possible. And what's interesting is 401ks, 403bs are built off of, and there's these, and I'm going to really nerd out, but there's what's called 415 limits. It's still in that 400 code section, where they limit how you fund those accounts, but also how you get access to them. Well, as you can imagine, much later in the tax code system, in the 457, that's a completely different section. They wrote this for government employees, people who serve in not-for-profits and other things. And really the gist of what makes these things a superpower, exactly what Dave was talking about, is that they were like, man, a lot of public service workers, like police officers, teachers, and others, they're going to retire much sooner, and they need to have access to this money. So they actually wrote the 457 legislation and the code section where there's no early withdrawal penalty. So like yourself, Dave, you said you will be eligible for your pension at 51 years of age. You couldn't get access to IRAs. You couldn't get even access to 401ks until 55 or 59 and a half. So that's a problem. What I love about 457s is that they can give you that early access, because there's no prepayment or no early withdrawal access penalties like you do in a lot of other retirement accounts. Now, the second part of your question is, how do you balance out after tax versus like 457s that don't have a penalty? The problem with 457s a lot of times, though, is still, especially in those traditional formats, whatever you pull out of them, as if they're traditional contributions, they're going to be taxed at ordinary income tax rates. And you might decide you want to, really take advantage of your early retirement, since you're no longer going to have earned income coming in, that you want to do some Roth conversions, or you want to use money that's not going to have a big tax impact. That's where what Dave was talking about was having an after-tax account, like an individual brokerage account or joint brokerage account, can be that bridge in your early 50s, especially, to where you can legally, hear me say the word legally, manipulate the tax code system by, balancing between using those after-tax savings and then doing Roth conversions. Or if you need to, you can pull into 457 since they don't have penalties, but there's all kind of cool planning that you can do in your early 50s to really maximize those retirement dollars and also minimize what you pay in income taxes. This is what I always share with everybody, that I try to make all of my advice as simple as possible. However, success just breeds complexity. It just naturally happens. That's why people like financial advisors are the worst. They charge. I'm like, no, take advantage of all my free stuff. Go to moneyguy.com/resources, load up on all the free stuff. And if you don't feel like your life is complicated, don't hire a financial advisor. Just make sure you're maximizing things. But just like what I discussed, 457s, 401ks, Roth conversions, you recognize in your 50s, all this stuff starts happening all at once. That's when the abundance cycle kind of fills in. It's because you're going to realize, man, I've only got one retirement. I need to find somebody who's done this hundreds of times. And that's why I love my system, is I get to give you as much free advice as you want. Don't rush it, but there will be enough complexity with your successful future self that will keep the lights on, and you can consider hiring a bound wealth at that point.
And as Brian always says, you want to measure twice and cut once.
Exactly.
You don't want
right.
to do the DIY thing where you watch a YouTube video and hope that you can plan your retirement. You want somebody who's a professional to be able to help you out, not just build a shed in the backyard via YouTube.
If there's no value, or if they don't think they need, because I will tell you, most people, and I love that I got to share this in Millionaire Mission. In the last chapter, I tell people exactly what I do with my money, and I'll just go ahead and ruin a portion of it. As I shared that I can't remember if it was 90 or 92% of my money is in index funds, just like I tell clients. And I have my children's accounts. I mean, I love index investing. And that's one of those things where you don't have to let somebody go sell you a product. You can go buy index funds, be successful, but that doesn't keep you from having complexity enter your life at some point.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the Millionaire Mission as we wrap up here. When does the book release? And tell us the inspiration for the book. If you can give us a brief overview of some of the highlights.
Yeah, the book actually comes out May 28th of this year. But I don't wait until then. Here's what I would ask your audience is go to moneyguy.com/millionaire mission, because we are offering perks and all kind of things all the way up to launch date. So I would encourage people to go check out the website, pre-order it. Because look, I don't have a big corporation behind me. What has driven this entire mission for the last 18 years is really the passion to educate. That's why I loved, Dave, what you're creating. And I'm trying to crawl on the shoulders of my grandmother, my mother, and I was even very passionate about education my entire life. But it's just my classroom's different. I mean, I have a digital classroom that reaches millions of people, but I need people to go buy this book so that it has the impact and makes a statement. Because I think we're well known to the financial mutants and all the nerds that are out there trying to maximize their money, but we're not. I don't know what it is, but it is hard without the corporate background or some big platform pushing you. So I want people to buy this book early so that we can hopefully make an impact, because if you're not going to get on any best-selling list unless you sell a lot of books coming out of the chute, and that's not guaranteed. But I really want people to look at this also because it's going to open their mind as well as their wallet and purses to opportunities you never dreamed. Because that's the big thing that got me even into podcasting, was I realized that there was a whole group of people who didn't know what to do with their money. And I felt kind of guilty that as a wealth manager or a guy who is now helping wealthy families maximize their money, as I was like, man, there ought to be an easier way for people to learn the basics and know how to do this without getting ripped off. You shouldn't go get taken advantage of by somebody selling you an inappropriate product. You ought to have somebody who's just giving you good education on how to do this. And that was the inspiration. But it wasn't until the pandemic that I was at the home at house with a little extra time, and I was like, you know what, this is probably the perfect time to actually write down the origin story for every one of these financial order of operations steps. Let people know what in my life made me come up with this realization, and how you, the listener and reader of the book, can actually internalize this and maximize your journey. So you don't even have to make the mistakes I made. And I'm hoping that this has the exact same inspirational impact that Mr. Morrow, my economics teacher, had, as well as those authors that wrote those books that I found in the 90s. I really do want it to light people's fire. And then even if you're wealthy, I hope you read this and go and you pick up one or two little maximization techniques that even if you are successful, it changes your life. But I think that if you'll give this thing a fair shake, it can be a fire starter for sure.
Yeah, what a great gift, for a graduation present in June with kids graduating. We often don't know what to get a kid. And it's like, oh, do I get him a gift card for Chick-fil-A or whatever? There's so much data out there. I think it's like 50% of gift cards go unused and nobody ever even uses that. Why not give somebody a book that can maybe change their life? So as a teacher, you might get invited to a lot of graduation parties. Maybe you can hand out some copies of the Millionaire Mission, and what a cool thing to maybe do, even if you leave a couple copies in the teacher's lounge, and it can be a talking point among other educators, because often in the teacher's lounge, it's negativity. It's woe is me. We don't make
Yeah.
enough money. Things are really tough right now. Things are stressful to be a teacher, to be a good teacher. You're exhausted to do a really good job. And a lot of these people don't feel like they have extra time to learn about money. So maybe this is something you can do with your colleagues. So as we sign off for today, it's been a lot of fun. I could hang out with Brian all day. I feel like I'm going to be invited to one of his golf trips here with his old buddies growing up. But can you give some advice or some inspirational hope to the teachers of America who listen to our show that they can be a part of this millionaire mission too?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I put throughout the book, and we're going to have a book tour. Unfortunately, not going to North Carolina, but we are going to be doing Atlanta, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., and then Dallas, Texas. So I don't know if any of those are close enough to you, Dave, but I'm going to be asking people, and this is something that's all throughout Millionaire Mission, the book as well, is what small decision are you making today that can maximize not only this moment, but also your great, big, beautiful tomorrow. And I think that if I could encourage anything, just do something. I think if people just knew all it takes, if you try to take such a big goal of creating wealth and abundance from where you want to be, you'll never do it because it seems so complex. But if you can just make one small decision, one incremental decision to say, listen to this show is either buying the book, and maybe this is the day I buy the book, but I also go start my Roth IRA. That could be the thing that changes your entire life. And everybody initially, you'll feel a little awkward because I think all new skills feel somewhat awkward, but you'll look back on it probably 3 to 5 years and you'll go, whoa, this thing is starting to catch traction. And then you'll look back in 10 years and go, wow, this thing, it's replacing months of my income now. If I look at what's going on in my monthly statement, and then 20 years in the future, you're going to start having the flexibility that if you feel like you're stuck or you're not in the perfect place, you don't have to keep doing the same thing because you now are kind of controlling and own your time, which I think is the most valuable thing all of us are seeking. How do you build independence to where you truly own your time and can maximize your personal life and live your best life so you don't have regrets later? And that's what the Millionaire Mission's done is I give you the math, but I also give you the mindset so that you can kind of understand, because I think that's where I think I do a better job than most is that I have this weird brain where I'm nerdy, but I'm very sentimental and I'm also very observant of what people's why is. And I've tried to give you all that so that you can know where the numbers are, but also know how you'll get there and be very happy with where you end up in your journey.
Yeah, if you've never checked it out, guys, check out the Money Guy Show. Brian, again, is nerdy.
Older, there's tons of great teachable stuff that will hopefully light your fire of independence.
Well, Brian, we appreciate you joining our podcast, and I really look forward to that book. And I want to thank all the Fit listeners for joining us on this week's version of the Fit Educator podcast. We hope you join us for next week, and we only have a handful of more weeks until summer break. They say the best time to be a teacher is June, July, and August, and you guys are almost there. But as always, be frugal, be fearless, and be a lifelong learner. Take care, everybody.